Hello, my name is Sydney Michelle. I was assigned to Group 3, which is the Chapter 9, I believe. And my presentation is based on the culture, interpersonal space, and touch. And I was assigned pages 247 to 251 out of the book. So let's go ahead and start. My first slide is titled Interpersonal Space. I started out by explaining what proxemics is, which is the study of space and how we use it. Not actual space, like not outer space, but actual space between you and an object or a person, How it makes us feel more or less comfortable, and how we arrange objects and ourselves in relation to space. For example, there are 4 levels of interpersonal space use depending on the social relationship type. There's let's picture it as if it was a bubble. You know how we all have our comfort space bubble? Like sometimes we don't want people to get too close to us if he was uncomfortable. Well, that's what it basically is. There's 4 levels, which is the intimate, which is the closest one between you and the object or the person. Then there's a personal bubble, personal circle, personal space, which is the second closest one. Then there's a social, and then there's a public. So it all just depends how comfortable you are to this person or object, and that's what basically it is. How does it apply to the culture? So there's a difference. People of all cultures appear to use the space, but they differ in the amount of space, which means, for example, for Arab people, and there's an example in the book, which was the Arab males, they tend to sit closer to each other rather than American males, which tend to leave a little bit more space. It differs because the book was talking about how in the past Arabs had to like get comfortable with each other, like they had to be close together in small spaces and stuff like that. So that's maybe another reason why. But anyways, to my next slide. So for communication, let me read what communication is. It is basically a complex and intricate process that involves the exchange of messages between interactants, and both verbally and non-verbally. So, for example, for communication, there is the messages, which is basically the information and the meanings that are exchanged when the people communicate. Like, say my brain says this and I'm trying to communicate to that person, that what I'm trying to communicate is a message. Then there's encoding, when people select messages consciously or not unconsciously, sorry. That's what people select, like that's what they develop in their brain, that's what they're trying to say in their brain. And then there's the signals, which is observable behaviors that carry messages. For example, facial expressions, like body language and all that types of stuff. Then there's channels, which is sensory modalities by which signals are sent and messages are retrieved. Usually it has to do with the sight and sound. Then there's decoding, which is the opposite of encoding. It is what the person receives. It's when the person receives the signal and translates them into messages. And it's what you're receiving and you're actually translating for you to understand what they're actually saying. And that's it for this slide. For my next slide, it's encoding and decoding, which is I already explained in the last slide what it is exactly, but peoples of all cultures learn rules from early childhood that aid in deciphering the cultural codes in speech and nonverbal behavior. Basically, when you're growing up, you get to understand, you get to learn what is right, what is not, I don't know if that makes sense, sorry. People get to experience, if you say something wrong, if you say something right, now you know what not to say, now you know what to say. For example, these rules develop with encoding and decoding. examples of cultural decoding rules. There's ethnocentrism, which is basically anyone who judges people or traditions based on their own cultural standards. That's biased to me, to be honest. And then there's cultural filters, like you understand what the other person is going to feel if you say this, and you choose not to, or you choose to say this. There's stereotypes, judgments, expectations, and yeah. For the next slide, I have intraculture communications. It is a communication that occurs among people of the same cultural background. So let me explain some of this. People see it as better or more comfortable to communicate with someone that is from the same cultural background as you, because you relate in a sense. You get to understand the message that is actually coming to you, instead of focusing on, oh, is he gonna understand me? I don't think he would understand if I talk about my family issues. Like, I don't think we have the same family issues. And let me just explain the other one, the intercultural communication, so it could make more sense. So basically, intercultural communication is the exchange of knowledge, ideas, thoughts, concepts, and emotions of people with different cultural backgrounds. It becomes more difficult to focus on the messages being exchanged, since we might not be encoding and decoding messages using different cultural codes. So what that exactly means is that, say these two people, okay, I'm Mexican. Say this Mexican and this American are trying to have a conversation. They are trying to communicate. So let's say this Mexican talks with a heavy accent and looks very Mexican, I guess. And then there's this American also trying to communicate. The American would probably not focus very much on the message they're trying to say. Instead, they would be stereotyping. They'll be judging them based on their looks, on their accent. Oh, are they gonna understand me? I don't think they would understand what I feel, my lifestyle, you know? And then the Mexican, they would probably be thinking, oh, why am I gonna talk to this person, this American? We're not the same. We're not gonna understand the same things. We have such a different life, you know? That's the difference. So basically, people are more comfortable with the intracultural. So people in between, inside their own culture communicating, you know, it's better for them. It's more comfortable, instead of the intercultural communication, since it's different. But yeah, that's it for today.